minutes. We have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Mitchell, Superintendent Mitchell. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? Hearing no one against, that's going to pass 8-0 with currently members Anderson, Demana, and Guzmini absent. Mr. Chandler, you keep track of the other attendees for me, if you could, please.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I have Will Meyer coming in now.
Okay, so we are going to move to item 4, which is the schematic design estimate review, a high school transition building, and who am I turning it over to right now? Is that you, Holly?
It would be Robert, actually. Are you going to pull the document up, Mike? So are we looking at things or?
Which document do you want? I have the estimates versus SD estimates, swing space estimates.
Just the summary sheet. Robert, this is the most recent summary sheet you sent,
On the 13th.
correct? Excuse me, on the 13th.
Give me 1 second.
There's one for the,
Yeah, these are the two here, I believe. These are the two that you're looking for.
and one for the swing space.
The breakdown that was on Friday.
Robert, is it these two?
Yes.
Which one do you want to start with?
McLaughlin's easier. So basically, this is just a summary of all the other backup information that was given. And so if you follow the columns across, the first one is when we submitted stage 2 to RIDE in February, it included estimates for that version of SD that was submitted with stage 2. So the first column is the number about where we were then. This is the construction number, this doesn't have all of the soft costs and whatnot that Colliers would have added into the budget. This is just for the construction and GC markup. And then the second number is the estimates that we got last week for this SD design that we're in now. Okay, that's the total, again, the total construction number, including the GC markup. Then we were asked to break out how much of that upswing was for COVID-19 things that we added, which is the third column. The 349,761 is all mechanical upgrades included with the COVID things that would have been added. So the fourth column is the second column minus the third column. So you can see, and then the last column is just the math. So we were at 9,302, and then without any of the COVID upgrades, we're at 9,4. So there's a slight increase of 129, which is just part of it is just because it's months later, and part of it is just because we did add a couple things like some bathrooms at the kindergarten. So then if you go down the sheet, the part that's highlighted is just a sort of summary breakdown of some of the items that are included in that 348,761 numbers, because some of the things that we talked about that could be added to improve for the COVID was the bipolar ionization, the HEPA and MERV 13 filters, different controls for the different equipment that would be required for that, and then things to boost the air circulation. So those are sort of breakdowns of what's really costing what in terms of the HEPA filters versus the ionization and whatnot. Then we were asked to get an add alternate pricing if we were to include cooling in certain areas. So that's the 36,000. So the bottom would be if we went all in with everything, which would be the 9.7 plus the 36, that you would come out to the 9.8. Or if we just decided we're not going to do any of this COVID stuff or cooling thing, you'd be at the 9.4.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee at this point?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Member Bolio.
Just in terms of ionization, filters, controls, and airflow, all those numbers are in the details of the other large, I'll call it kind of tabulated spreadsheets, as far as I could tell. And there's the general condition markup. Do you know the markup that is applied to that to get to the 348,761?
Yes and no, which is why I kept it out. So at one point I had asked PM&C, who did the estimate, to give me the total for everything related to COVID. So they gave me the 348,761. So that is what they believe, what the independent estimator is saying is your total for like the COVID. Then when I was asked to break it down between the 4 different categories, I picked out line items. And then rather than trying to go back to the first page and figure out what kind of markups they were using and then, or asking them to redo their estimate again to give all these things, I figured these are comparative numbers. So the 348 is the total if you accepted all of that. But this gives you, although this is without the markup, this gives you an idea of how they compare to each other. Like the controls is not a big number, but of course the filters are.
Yeah, so the 348 has the markup.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I mean, in terms of the original total, which was 9.4, and it looks like we're adding about 400K for all this, including the air conditioning. Does that sound like a reasonable uptick given the benefits that this would provide?
I think the conversation needs to be over the entire project, as we've all talked about having parity through the project. So this is one school, but we're going to be doing all of the schools. So when you add that multiplied by the amount of campuses, the number is fairly large. I mean, we all recognize the importance of this, but I'd like to just put some other points out there. When the schematic design actually were submitted with the stage 2, obviously there was lots and lots of work involved in making sure that all the bonus points were tapped into with the educational enhancements and all. So the bigger concern is if we start taking apart design elements within the school, we need to be careful that we're not touching enhancements that would jeopardize any bonus points. Recognizing this point, it seems like it's a small number, but if you remember, the project started as an $83 million project. RIDE approved 79. So there was a $4 million hit out of the gate. So they had talked about that they weren't going to fund furniture. Well, obviously all of these projects need furniture. So we have to take that $4 million and reduce all of these projects across the board by that number. And then within the number, find money for furniture. So the combination of possibly jeopardizing bonus points for educational enhancement, in picking out scope of each of these buildings, and trying to find money for the furniture, which is a big number typically. I just want to make that everyone aware that it's a risk, and losing bonus points after everything that we've gone through for design to make sure that Cumberland got them all is a relevant point. The other conversation I think is important is because you were approved at 83 from a bond perspective, and then 79 was approved, you technically have a $4 million spread of bond approval from the voters. So one of the options that you might want to consider when you're going through what upgrades, COVID upgrades you'd like to implement in these projects is perhaps you could do, depending on how the bond was written, you could check with bond counsel, but you technically have a $4 million approval, and you could go in with a stage 1, stage 2 in the next, year or two, and go in for an HVAC COVID package for the campuses and try to fund it that way. But these are to take each project, especially when you're looking at the high school numbers, which we will, you take each project and you take into account the $4 million hit that was originally taken from RIDE, that they took from Cumberland, on top of finding money for the furniture, and then trying to find scope to remove from all of these schools in order to fund these changes. It really needs to be thought carefully, because it can have an impact, a trickle-down impact. And getting to a point where you get to school 5, you want to make sure you have enough money for school 5. So with that, I just wanted to put that on the table as we go through this process, as you make these decisions, because they're all pretty big decisions.
So Holly, that's good clarification. I guess I would ask, so there's two things there. One is to know what the total potential ask would be for all these COVID related changes
Right.
for all the projects. So we know what sort of total number we're looking for.
Mhm.
Because right now this looks like 400K. And obviously it's just for one of the
Right.
4 or 5 projects. And then what's the timeline for us to actually be able to make this decision so that we don't miss the window to actually pull the trigger on this stuff and get it done at the right time?
Well, if you take the elementaries out of this conversation just for now, and you look at the high school, if the high school numbers as we go through them, they're very high. I mean, it's a project that had $1 million, not even $1 million allocated to it. So now I believe it's at 4. So then you would have to take that 3 million and spread it over all these campuses as well. So then you're really tapping into the design element and what RIDE will accept as far as enhancements and far as the bonus points. So I think first thing, as far as trying, if you wanted to tap into that $4 million bond approval, the first step would be to go to bond counsel and check on how it's written. Typically, they're written very generally.
I'm going to shut you off there, Holly.
Okay.
I mean, we need to know what the total is before we think about how we're going to solve the problem. We don't have a good understanding of what the total problem is. We've got 400K here and another, whatever it is for the other piece of paper presented tonight, but that's not the total. So
Right,
we need to know the total before we can make any decisions. Forget about talking about bond counsel or anything like that.
I understand that, but none of these other schools are at a point where their schematic design is at a point where you would get an estimate, because so you would be jumping ahead into this. These 2 projects are on the line right now. They're going to start soon, which is why they're the first ones up. But to get all of these projects in the window of time to make that decision is not realistic, because you have all these other schools where this whole process would have to be done. I mean, Robert, you can jump in here. I mean, we're at this point now because of these 2 projects happen to be the first out of the gate. So we're able to get this level of information because the plans are done to this point. You follow? So it's not as easy as just, could you say each elementary school by square footage or all, like, is it going to average 4,400 a piece? Perhaps. I mean, that would be up to the architect, and perhaps Will can jump in there, but you'd have to estimate. You would never be able to get this level of detail for all of the schools coming up, not to mention escalation if it's 2023, 24.
Oh, okay, so we obviously can't get very detailed or specific numbers, but we do have, in the case of the McLaughlin School, where it's an addition being built, and the uptick is roughly 4% for these types of additions. In contrast, the high school and swing space is a lot of renovation as opposed to new, and that's much more significant,
Right.
like a 50% upcharge or something like that. Is there a way to look at the planned activities and sort of ballpark what the total is?
I would think that could be done.
Yeah.
Robert, do you have an opinion on that, or Will?
Well, let me just add
Louis.
that would make sense to be done for all of the existing elementary schools in their current condition. Obviously, the new additions will not come in line for years, but in the meantime, you can do the bipolar and the filters for the existing spaces.
Louis, are you saying that for this particular project to incorporate those additions?
No,
Or are you,
for these two projects, it's the time to incorporate it into the additions. But in the other projects, the only work that could be done right away is
oh, yes.
upgrading the existing systems.
Right. So as far as getting an estimate for this level of a, COVID scope of work for the schools coming online, not these two,
Yes,
but the others coming online.
No, I get it.
Okay.
I would like Will, if he's still on, to
You had to drop
to
off.
So
I think that it's something that's going to require a little time, but that it's doable at this point. In that we're mainly assessing existing systems and how we can enhance them for the COVID.
Okay, so just to be clear, tonight we're just reviewing these things. We get to ask a bunch of questions. Perhaps we go back, we've got more homework to do, but we don't have to decide anything tonight because there's no vote on this this work. This is just an update meeting. Am I correct?
right, I believe we would love to get the schematic design into RIDE. So I would like to hope between now and the December meeting, excuse me, we can trigger that, because at this point we need to keep the process moving. So we have the DD, the SD, and then the DD into RIDE. So it's all tied together. But yes, the whole intent tonight was to be able to look at the numbers, understand the larger impact on the project as a whole, find out what the priorities are of the district, recognizing if you make these decisions, what it's going to do to the budget that we are now currently working with. So, there are just ramifications for all of this. And I think none of us want, any school to get shortchanged, or certainly don't want to lose bonus points because scopes of work had to be pulled out to pay for some of these upgrades. When I was thinking about the $4 million, perhaps if that would work, the high school or the middle schools, like that is, you look at the numbers of the high school, I believe that number would fit within there. And I'm more concerned because we're trying to, even with the budget as it is now, without these upgrades, we're going to really have to make things happen to make sure you get your furniture, to make sure that the numbers come in and you're not giving up what the district is expecting in each of these schools. So I worry about a $400,000 upgrade on an elementary school now, and what will that upgrade look like for the third school down the line, right? So with escalation, escalation right now happens to be very low, but we don't know what's going to happen. So that number might become 500,000 or 600,000, and then you're taking it from that scope. So trying to figure out the best avenue to be able to do as much as you can for the COVID situation and the that might be the cleanest way to do it without dissecting all of these projects and trying to pull scope out without jeopardizing funding.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's advocating taking scope out. You know, unless RIDE has some change in priorities because of COVID, then
Well,
they basically said that 79 was appropriate for all the work that we needed to do.
right, but
And-
when you add this COVID information, when you add that 400,000 or the 350, that is scope that's already been identified, for that money has been identified for other areas. You know, so it's just a matter, and these are estimates where the construction numbers come in. I'd like to say they're going to be right there, but you never know. So there's that as well. So, you know, I typically don't see budgets coming in under an estimate, unfortunately.
That'd be a first.
Can
That would be a first.
I try to get somebody to address those 4 items, the ionization, filters, controls, and airflow, and give us a little synopsis of what's in each one of those items?
Robert?
Did
I mean,
Will come back?
no. And
Okay, Robert, can you try it?
okay. So, okay. So let's try with the filters, because I probably have the best understanding of that. Everybody gets what the filter is. Now, the MERV 13 filters are just a heavy duty filter. So the typical type of filter you would put on a mechanical system in order to stop particles from going through with the airflow. It's a denser filter, so it's going to stop more particles. And the HEPA filters is more complicated because it is actually like a piece of equipment that is goes hung from the ceiling that helps circulate the air and bring the filters that way. So the HEPA filters are more expensive than the MERV 13 filters. It's a different system.
Okay, so the company that I work for does a lot of business in pharmaceutical facilities. So there are several ways to do HEPA filtration. One of them is to have HEPA filters within the unit itself. Typically, the unit itself, if you're going to have a HEPA filter which captures finer particles, needs to be a heftier unit. It has a greater pressure drop through the filter to blow air through the filter. The other way to do HEPA filtration is to have individual HEPA, like fan-powered filters in a ceiling. And basically what it does is it takes air that's above the ceiling and recirculates it through the HEPA into the room. I'm assuming that this number certainly is a whole lot more than just the addition of a different type of filter to an existing unit.
So I think the answer to that question is both, because I think where we are introducing, where we already had in the scope, rooftop equipment, new equipment, we were just adding to it like you first described. But in the other spaces where we didn't have new equipment, we were adding the second one, what we were talking about, which is the sort of fan circulating thing. So this number is a combination of whichever of those needs to go in the particular spaces, or like the new equipment that we're in the addition is going to have a smaller cost to add the HEPA filter to that new unit versus the new unit we would be putting in the ceiling of the existing building, because you don't have that type of a mechanical system there. That would be the more expensive number within the 190.
I understand that, and it seems to be an awfully expensive way to provide filtration that we wouldn't normally provide, certainly in a school. I understand, I understand as well as anybody what's going on around us. This may be another one of those decisions that I don't know how to do it, but I hear what Holly's saying about having to compromise other things and potentially lose some funding. If it weren't for the COVID, this is not something we'd even ordinarily entertain at all. I'm not suggesting that we don't try to make things a little bit better, but I'm not sure this is the way to go about it. If that, in fact, is the way that it's happening here, I would like to get, and apparently there's nobody on that can provide it. I would like to get a better definition as to, like I said, what's in each one of these numbers.
Hey, Mark.
Tough to make a decision. Yeah.
Maybe I could get Mike Chandler to pull up page 10 of the bigger detailed document. It has air distribution and air handling, kind of more specifics, which might help. It sounds like you've got some particular expertise here. So page 10 and page 19 have that info that sums to the 276 that was just up.
Give me 1 sec. Let me see if I can grab that.
Yeah.
The Cumberland Hill McLaughlin SD estimate.
Sorry, I don't think you're in the right one. That was the document of confusion. So if you go back to the Dropbox, Mike. It's the third from the bottom, I believe.
Yes.
Page 10 of that document. At the bottom, sorry, or mid-page, you'll see air distribution dash COVID requirements. I guess it's line 2. My God, that's small. 266. So that's half, and then the other half's on page 19. So maybe that's helpful, Mark.
Yeah, 20. Is that number off to the right? See the ceiling mounted HEPA filtration units? 10?
Mm-hmm.
That's a per number, the 6,000. So that ends up being
Okay.
60.
Okay, that I get you now. All right. Okay, I guess that's what he's doing. But there's only 10 of those.
This is, believe this is in just in one area, because on another page there's like, I think it was 120,000 or something like that for much more of them.
Yeah, if you go back to page 10, there was 22 on that page for 130. So 190 altogether for the HEPA.
Yeah, there's 22.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, I have a question. I don't know if this is, the right time to ask it. I'm sorry, Mark, and Rick, gentlemen, were you done with your questions? I don't want to interrupt your flow here if you're still looking at that information.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand what was in these things. My initial impression is I certainly wouldn't do all of them. I don't think we can afford that over the course of 9 or 10 schools. So I think we need to be judicious here in, the choice of what we do for additional filtration or trying to kill bugs or whatever you want to call it. We're already tight on budget. I think we need to take a good close look at these things.
Okay, all right. Mr. Chairman, can I ask my question now?
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, and first of all, let me forgive my naivete. This is not, a subject that I know a whole heck of a lot about, but I just, based on what Holly said, and just to piggyback on what Mark just said, I'm just curious as to, and I understand completely that we have a responsibility under the circumstances in this day of COVID to, consider, the additional focus on, things like ventilation and that sort of thing. So I understand that completely. So my question is, if we're seeing that it's going to cost for one school close to $400,000, I think we can safely assume that if we, do it in one school, that we would certainly have to consider doing it in other schools, that it would cost us at least, just to be conservative, a couple $1 million. Now, that would mean then that if we're spending an additional sum of money on controls, then we would have to take it from someplace else, right? So that is question number one. So let's just assume, just for the sake of discussion, if the additional ventilation work or control work would cost $2 million, then we would have to take that $2 million from someplace else, from that $79 million. Is that correct? I'm assuming so.
Yeah, I would think that would be correct.
Okay, so I mean that makes perfect sense. So here's the second part of the question. I guess that's I think even more important for me that I need to have answered. So if the scope is changed because we are focusing more attention on this work, does that impact the bonus points that we received? And if so, we would be on the hook for more money because we wouldn't be getting all of the bonus points potentially. That's my second question. Is that an accurate assumption as well?
Would you like me to?
Yeah, Holly, I think Holly spoke to that a little bit, but if you want to.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear.
In order to find the $2 million that you would do across the elementary schools or any other work, you'd have to go into the design intent and remove scope. It has to come from someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so between that and the 83 to the 79, on top of finding the furniture money, on top of that $2 million, you have to tap into the design and the element of the educational enhancements is the bonus points that I was referring to, because it'd be where you would have to go. So that was my concern. And it's not like you're going to get a clean answer from RIDE. It's not like if you ask them, they'll tell you, as we know what we had to go through for them to get that light commitment originally. So it would all be, once it got there, we'd find out. And that is, it's a risk and it's possible. You know,
So,
and
so just to be clear, one of the big selling points in all of this, and I remember it vividly because we talked about it so many times, that we were getting, and I understand it's 79 million now, but the referendum that voters voted on was essentially $83 million worth of work for $29 million, right? So that was like a major selling point, and who wouldn't support that? So I guess the big question for me, and I think you've answered it, is that it wouldn't be 79 for 29. It might be 79 if the scope changed and the bonus points changed. It might be 79 for a higher dollar amount. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense, or am I like way off base?
Well, from what everybody's saying, Bob, it sounds like, yeah, if we really screw up the submission, yeah, they're going to take a whole bunch of stuff away. So the experts that are on this phone call basically need to look at and see where we might do some differences without screwing that up. I think that's the takeaway that I'm getting on this.
Okay, yeah, all right,
and then
good. Yeah, thank
ultimately,
you.
and just to know what the total is, because this is a stepwise 5-year process, to know what that anticipated total is. Maybe it only makes sense to do the high school and the trans, because every single elementary school is going to have to cycle through there as part of the construction activities at each of their schools. I think, we have to understand what we are trying to do and what the magnitude of the financial problem is, and come up with ways to solve it. I think that's the point of this committee, because I for one wouldn't relish the fact to just say, oh, screw it, I guess we can't do it, time to move on. That's kind of not where I am.
the option of going in for a smaller bond that's already been approved and go into RIDE for money specifically for this is an option. If the bond language works, then you could actually go in and anytime you want with a stage 1 and 2 requesting the difference between the 79 and the 83 and apply it to HVAC projects. That's an option that and you can do that at any time. You don't have to wait till the end of the 5 years. You can do that at any point. And that might be a way to fund these other projects that would then not touch or have to break out, scopes of work that are driven by the educational enhancements. The high school is $3 million more than is there at all. So if you go into the high school, you then have to take $3 million away from the other projects. So
we haven't talked about those details yet. So that'll be interesting to understand how it went up just by 400 without COVID, or excuse me, 4 million without COVID. So I think that's a separate conversation, but I think it's a good idea, Holly, just to see what RIDE's willing to do and what priority they want to place on this. Because my understanding, we have a whole bunch of money in here for other security, and one could argue that this is as necessary security as other security.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, let me chime in here a little bit, because I think this is what some of the frustration is. Even at the beginning, when the governor kind of presented this plan, right? Wasn't it warm, safe, and dry, right? And the big word that keeps getting bandied about is safe, right? And what is safe enough, or what isn't safe, right? And so then, and the superintendent could speak to this. We're at a meeting where the state says if you put this machine in a room that has no windows, no ventilation systems, but you drop this machine in that room and it's under 8,340 cubic feet, well, that makes enough air exchanges for you to bring the density of that classroom back to 30 kids, right? And so the messaging that comes from leadership, if you will, I mean, that's what the frustrating part is, Rick. And it's like, to me, I'd like to put the monkey on their back. If you really want it to be warm, safe, and dry, and you've knocked us $4 million, maybe somebody would go back and look at that and say, well, maybe we ought to bring that up to $83 million. And here's a good reason why. If we were really, really seriously interested in students being warm, safe, and dry, and I understand and I obviously made this point a million times in the past, but the argument for that was sold, that was a different world, right? Not only was it 2 years ago, it's just not the same world. And so it is frustrating that we find ourselves in a situation where people want you to bring kids back because we know the value of in-person learning, but do not want to do, and then I keep saying this, I'm a broken record, right? Then saying the adults don't want to do the hard work, and but there's a few adults that I could pinpoint that I don't think want to do the hard work or wanted to talk a good game, but not necessarily execute it. So, I think it's one of those things you'd be second guessed if you didn't have this conversation. People will go, wow, you had all this money and you knew you had this problem and you didn't do anything about it. But then on the flip side, I could say, well, I sat in a room and they said, if this portable machine is in there, you're good to go and you can bring 30 kids back, right? So it's one of those, I'm not sure you can win. I do think, but with the parameters that we have in front of us right now, adding, scope that would force us to remove it is obviously is a serious consideration, There is and I think Holly has touched upon it. I mean, you did get voter approval for up to $83 million, and the fact is that it's 79 right now. So you might get an opinion from bond counsel that says you could borrow another $4 million without voter approval. You would have to get legislative approval from the town council to do so, but it is an option. I just don't. I don't know. There is not a vote scheduled for this evening. But I think ultimately they're going to be looking for some sort of direction. So that might just be a very, very difficult, that might be a difficult ask tonight for a direction when like I say, it's one of those things where obviously the clear answer is you want to do something and put yourself in a position to succeed in the future. But if no one's going to help you out and you're going to pull some other scope, what is that scope that you would pull out, and what would be the argument you would make? I mean, perhaps you'd make a good one. I don't know. But anyway, those are my editorial comments for right now.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the other thing that I think is relevant here is I personally was hoping to get a sense of bang for our buck. And right now we kind of have all these items, ionization filters, controls, airflow, et cetera, totaling up to this number. Without any real good conversation about, if it were my money, I'd definitely do ionization, but, filters, I don't think so. It just doesn't seem to be worth it, or whatever the analysis is. But it'd be good to know if there were some prioritization or if these things have to be bundled in a particular way that they're inseparable. I think that would be helpful too. So if we had a small, medium, large choice, that might help with the budget reconciliation that we're talking about too.
I believe if Will Mayer was able to get on this call, he would have been able to answer those questions. So that's unfortunate.
Yes, and what I was going to suggest is if maybe we have a subcommittee just to deal with these questions, and we can meet and talk with Will about this and them tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Ray, we can cut to the chase here. This is the biggest, this is the biggest issue with respect to these projects that we're looking to get, approval on. So, and it is unfortunate that that gentleman is not on the call, but I hate to make the suggestion, but I mean, clearly, if you took this issue out of here, this meeting probably be over, right? And so without this gentleman on the call, I almost find it difficult to proceed, to be honest with you. It's like, because we don't have the expertise to answer those questions. And I understand it's, the wheels of government are slow and it can be frustrating. And now you add the Zoom issue and here we go. But I would be uncomfortable having it on the record that I didn't at least turn over every rock before I said, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. I mean, maybe that's just the politician in me and not the building committee member, but I've had people snipe at me for things I didn't do. Never mind, things that they could go into the record and actually see that I did. So clearly, that's a problem that we do not have that gentleman on the call.
I'm
Yeah,
trying. I'm texting him now to see if I can get him back on.
Well, I think it's also difficult, Louis, if we can't see you and he can't look at what we're looking at. It's just not, it doesn't work very well. I hate to suggest this, but perhaps we could have another meeting sooner rather than later and not wait till December and make sure that the right people are here to answer the right questions and be able to break it down to we can actually, we also have the holidays coming. We also have to get this submission into RIDE. So it really, timing is actually pretty important here, and this is unfortunate. But I know next week is a little crazy, but perhaps the beginning of the following week or any time, actually.
Well, Holly, I think that's a good idea. I think whether it was Jeff or somebody else had suggested that we have a subcommittee meeting, if you will. But I think it would be wrong at this point to not continue to look at some of these numbers, because with the high school, the stage 2 hard cost estimate was just under $1 million. And now without COVID, it's 5.
Right.
So there's a $4 million wow factor that I'm just kind of curious about, that I'd like to hear before we get off the phone tonight. And I'll just say, in terms of people joining the call, I mean, it's a little bit JV that we cannot get our act together and dial in or use our computers. And next time, I don't think this should happen, because we got a heck of a lot of people on the line here. And if this were a real business type of situation, we'd have an awful lot of money going down the drain here by the minute. So let's try to tune up our game, please.
I won't take that personally, Rick.
No offense, Mr. Chairman, intended.
So
Thanks, Rick.
Robert, are you still on the call as far as, I don't see you. Are you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, no, the reason I'm asking is we can pull up the high school and go through that cover sheet, because that will, I believe will clarify. Mike?
I do have one quick question about the McLaughlin. What is the addition of the cooling? What does that actually cover for $36,000?
From what I understand, that is putting cooling into the addition, so that we have new rooftop units that would also be supplemented to be able to do cooling.
All right, thank you.
Can I interject though, and maybe I'm just trying to cut to the chase. I mean, if we get to we do talk about the high school. I mean, are we prepared? Do we have people on the call that are prepared to answer what Member Bolio brought up, or is this something that we do need to reschedule? I mean, it's so will that question be answered satisfactorily with who's on the call, or do we need to regroup?
I think that if there are very technical questions, we need to rely on our mechanical engineer to address those. If it's regarding the general distribution of where the additional cost came from, I think Robert will be able to address that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how the committee feels at this point. But I think we're heading down a path that there's going to be another meeting anyway. Although I think they should be. I mean, I guess it's not my call. And so, I mean, but I'll defer if people want, if you want to hear that explanation, we can move on, or we can move, to basically adjourning the meeting and scheduling another meeting. Obviously, we have public comment that we'd have to abide by. But so I don't know, what's the feeling of the of those on the committee, do they want to hear, at least part of the explanation, or do you want to start thinking about reschedule?
Mr. Chairman, I for one would like to hear just the difference, without getting into the technicals of the COVID increases, but the other increases are pretty substantial, and just to hear what that is. And if we don't get a good answer, then that can be part of the homework also. It's just my
Anyone
opinion.
else?
I
Mr.
would
Chairman?
agree.
Superintendent?
Yeah, I would agree that we should wait for the expert. I think that makes the most sense. And we have a couple of other items on the agenda that I think we should get through. But I would agree, let's wait for the experts to, answer those specific questions. That would be my vote.
I agree with
Mark?
getting specific answers and waiting, but is there maybe a general answer as to why there's a $4 million increase?
That seems to be that they seem to think that they could give you that answer. So I think unless someone's going to tally up the votes, I think we're outnumbered and we'll carry on. So who is up for that explanation on the scope from going from 943, 810 without
Yeah,
the code?
Robert, can you just go through the second spreadsheet that we have for the high school? And I think the biggest issue is that we had no work scheduled for the original high school, and this includes a lot of work in the original high school.
Well, this is, a year ago, when we revisited the scope and the distribution across the district, we were, instructed that the decision had been made to put the bulk into the elementary schools. Okay, so all of the elementary schools were getting updated work to the mechanical systems and whatnot as part of that scope. So to add what we're calling the COVID price is really about the ionization. And
Sorry, Bob, we're not talking about that at all. We're talking about the straight non-COVID increase that's described. Maybe, Mike, you can pull that up.
I think it's interesting that we're getting into this debate about what's COVID, what's non-COVID, because we've included RTU units added at the high school trans building, UV and RT units added at the main buildings. And then I've provided you with a 2-page spreadsheet that details exactly all the items of what that was. So what I'm getting
all right,
at,
Bob, can I hold you up there? Can we get the picture up so we can all look at what you're talking about here? Because I just want to be able to follow along and not have to imagine what you're talking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
And while they're doing that, if I could just note, it is true what Robert said. However, originally, we've never had a lot of work in the original high school building. The direction was that building was recently renovated and the focus was at the elementary schools. So the bulk of the work comes from the replacement of the unit ventilators, and I believe was 25 classrooms. And then as we talked last time we met, there are some classrooms and other student occupied spaces that don't have exterior walls, so they don't have unit ventilators. So to those, we've had to add rooftop units, possible additional structural support, and distribution.
Mike, page 1 of that, I believe. It's the summary. Yeah, that's the, I think, the old one or something. It should be summary stage 2 estimate for the Cumberland School, high school and swing space.
This is the breakdown of everything that's just that 3.3 million that is the HVAC equipment that we've added. Ionization and filters to equipment you're already adding is for COVID, but all of the equipment that we're adding to improve ventilation and air building, nothing to, I'm not sure, I mean, it's not, if we again make the decision that you don't do any of this work or you don't think it's cost effective or whatnot, but we were asked to look at what we could do to improve the airflow in the buildings to make it safer for everyone in this era of COVID. And how much?
Let me just, excuse me, let me interrupt you for a second. So just so I'm on the same page here too. So on that, the one-page summary, which I believe is up from what is currently on the screen, and you went past it a little bit, I think. Yeah, that's Cumberland Hill. You scroll down, there you are.
Oh, right there.
Right there. So at the 943,810, so that's the estimate of February 15th. What the addition here that gets the cost increase of 4 million, that's not based on the same scope that you had for the February estimate, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
So because if you just looked at it quickly, it looks like, well, that was the estimate. This is now the estimate on 11/4, and then you put the COVID. But the reality is, I guess to make add the COVID scope, you had to add additional scope to even make that be possible. Am I misreading that away? I mean, it's not like you estimated it at 943 in February, and the same scope is now estimated at $5 million.
Correct.
That's correct.
Right. So it's, yeah, okay.
So time out. Let me ask a question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. If we choose to not do COVID, the stage schematic design hard cost would be approximately $1 million?
That's what I believe.
Is that true?
Louis, all of these RTUs and everything was added once the district wanted to add the high school in the mix in those different wings and add the RTUs to the roof, right? I just want clarification.
And the RTUs are because so it all started with seeing that we're going to replace the unit ventilators in the transitional building. Why don't we replace them in the high school also? So we walked through, analyzed which ones we could change the unit vents to. There were rooms that did not have unit vents. For example, the school clinic doesn't have a unit vent, so we needed to add a rooftop unit. So the rooftop units that we added were for interior spaces that didn't have unit vents. But all of that work came out in the request of us analyzing how to improve because of COVID.
Okay, so this is a very misleading summary then, because right now it looks like that increase just went up, and then the COVID stuff is 1.7. So this is just not a very good representation of what's happening here. Because I think most people would say, wow, $6 million all in for a COVID increase on the high school? That's almost like a non-starter.
I think that's true. I think that what happens is that you do base work that is mechanical work, and then you enhance it to the COVID. But all of it is new scope of work.
So just to be clear, we basically decide we can't afford $6 million just on the high school. Then this goes back to $1 million, period.
Louis.
If that was the original, I think that there was some work that was shifted from the second phase of the project that was going to be done at the time that the kindergarten renovations took place, the pre-Ks, and that work was shifted to this phase. For example, that's when the unit ventilators in the classroom in the transitional building were scheduled to be replaced. That work was moved from phase B to phase A.
Okay, so that was work that was already planned.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So we really need to understand work that was planned as part of the 83, now 79, and work that's new. Does this spreadsheet even show that at all, or do
Yeah.
we have to try it again?
So the original scope for this phase was the 943,810. Then the
Okay,
650, 698 is the unit vent scope that was moved from phase B to phase A. So this phase would go up from 943 to basically 1.5, 1.6, but it's not new. It's not $600,000 you got to find. It's something you had budgeted for a different year. You've already budgeted for that money. You're just spending it in a different year. Okay. And then if you decided to add, um, filters and ionization just at those 21 new unit vents, then that would be another, uptick that's buried within the 1.7 million. So if you just moved something from one phase to the other and added a little bit of COVID filtration and ionization, you're at, 1.7, 1.8, something like that. Did I go too fast with that?
no, this is not very well put together, at least for me, to understand exactly what our options might be here. This is maybe part of the work that we need to follow up at the next meeting, because I don't think it's worth trying to get into it any more than what we have, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think when so when you look at the Cumberland Hill and then you look at this one, there is that, so you either see it as a glaring anomaly or you realize that that's not possible and that there had to be, there had to be another circumstance behind it. But clearly, yeah, if you were just going to look at stage 2 hard cost estimate in February, and then it just says the same estimate on 11/4/20 without COVID, yeah, without an explanation, that looks like a huge error in our estimating, so. But anyway, I'm kind of at the same place I was before. I don't know if anybody's moving not in any direction, but does anyone else have any questions on that, that summary that we're looking at currently on our screens?
I have a suggestion.
Okay, Ellie?
If we're going to have a meeting soon and the option would be to be able to see these in different packages, for lack of a better way to put it. So if you're just doing the ionization and not doing the filters, is there a way to break it down to the next meeting so you can see how they're tied together if they are? Is that something, Louis, that could be done without a lot of having to go back to the estimator? Is that something that can be pulled out of that?
Yeah, no. I think we may have to go back to him just for clarifications, but it's something that between us and our engineer we can do.
Would that be helpful? To be able to come back with package A, package B, package C, and get a better sense of what can be broken out of this bigger number? I'm just trying to get to an answer for the next meeting so you have enough information.
Let me jump in. So just keeping on this, what's on the screen here. If you were going to do the Cumberland High School, so forget about what's been planned, what hasn't been planned, what's in a bond, what's not in a bond. But if you were going to, I guess that this is the question maybe that, we need the other gentleman here, but just in that facility, we're looking at what is that summary estimate basically showing me that if you did all those things in the high school, is it $2.3 million more than we've scoped so far, or is it 3.391? What's the number? What's the actual number?
You're asking about the high school main building?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, that's so UV and RTU added at high school main building, 1.339373.
And then there's no other cost, there's gonna be other costs, right? I mean, so what I would want, here's what I would want. I would want some sort of estimate, whatever estimate you could come up with at the elementary schools. You know, because, you know, the consensus has been at least that, you know, in-person learning at the younger students, you know, provides a little bit of, I don't want to say relief, but obviously parents, you know, cannot not leave elementary school kids home for distance learning. But you can, even though we know there's a lot of pain doing so. So what would it, can we come up with an estimate to, you know, make these systems better and more, you know, for today's world at the elementary school? And then what would it be at the high school? If we had to make a choice, in other words, if we had to pick one or the other, you know, as opposed to, you know, going for the whole shooting match. Is that possible?
Yes, that is going to require a little bit of time. I would think that we would need at least a week to do that.
I mean, I guess what we'd be looking at is if we're looking at 83 million and we borrowed 79 and without, you know, just hypothetically here, we'd be looking at, you know, what potentially could fit into the $4 million difference is what I'm looking for, really.
Mhm.
And how do you break that up roughly? I don't want to spend $1 million coming up with the answer, though. You know, just something that's, you know, we're not going to hold you necessarily to it, but something we could feel some confidence in and break it down for high school and then other than high school, if you will.
We understand.
Okay. Is there anybody else who has any questions or any comments or? I mean, I think my feeling is to keep the same agenda. Let's, I mean, how do we want to work coming up with another date? Any ideas?
I think that what would be best for us is if you give us about a week to come up with some of these numbers in a format. If we can just email that once we have that to you, once you are able to clearly follow what our intent is, then we schedule the meeting. Because one of the things that we want to make sure that we accomplish is if we haven't provided totally clear information, we need to be able to adjust it so that when we have the meeting, it is totally clear.
Yeah, that sounds good. Why don't, yeah, let's take that tack, get it out to, you know, the membership. Everybody feels like they've got, you know, adequate information. And at that point in time, we'll send everybody some communication and make sure we can get a quorum and get a meeting scheduled.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, can I ask a quick question? Mr. Torado, who would need to be at this meeting that can speak to these estimates and the sums that are provided in these bigger packets? Somebody who kind of knows this spreadsheet inside and out. Who would that be?
Well, the mechanical engineer will need to be involved. If you're talking about breaking down PM&C's estimate in detail, then we would ask PM&C to be there.
Yeah, because it just seems like all the numbers being pulled into this spreadsheet come out of those bigger spreadsheets. I can't tell what might have already been accounted for in the, we'll call it the first total, and then what stuff is being added as COVID breakout costs. I just
yeah, I think maybe the best way of doing that is if we arrive at a scope and break out you want to see, and then let the cost estimator do it, and then he can write the summaries themselves. That would be the best way of doing that. That might require a little bit more time, but I suggest that we do the first task, do the breakdown and itemize things, and then once people are confident that we've been able to explain it, then have the cost estimator do the detailed accumulation of those prices. If I understand your question correctly.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else? Because I'm going to move to item 7, which is public comment. And I don't, Mr. Chandler, is there anyone who might be on the call that might avail themselves to public comment?
We do have 2 people on the phone, other than Lewis. If they'd like to speak, they can speak by unmuting. *9 to raise your hand, or *6 to mute and unmute.
If there's anyone out there that would like to address the committee, now is the time. Okay, so hearing none, the next item is scheduled next meeting. We will not, we will follow the aforementioned plan by Mr. Torado, and we will communicate with the committee and set up a date in the not too distant future. So any other comments by anyone, or? Okay, so everyone have a nice Thanksgiving, and we'll get some information out, and we'll take another shot at this soon.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Oh, you know what, Mr. Fiorillo, I was waiting to see if anybody was gonna call me on that. And I figured it would be you, but actually that's not true, so I appreciate you doing that. So
Motion
Mr.
to adjourn.
Fiorillo- Mr. Fiorillo moves adjournment. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Lindgren. Thank you. There is no discussion on that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
against? That passes 8-0. We are adjourned at 7:30 PM. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.